Welcome to the wide world of esports, a show devoted to all things esports. I'm your host, Katharine Nohr. Today, we're talking with Queensland University PhD student Dongqi Wang about graduate research in motor racing and esports and cycling esports. Welcome, Dongqi. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you so much for your invitation.
All right. So you're in Australia right now, and so you're going to school there.
Yeah, I'm still trying to finish my PhD study in Australia.
And where are you originally from?
Queensland. I'm from China, so it's the north part of China, Shandong province.
All right. So let me ask you, can you tell us a bit about your graduate research on esports in motor racing and cycling?
Yes, sure. So for me, it's a very interesting topic. My research topic is about understanding how sport organizations can use or leverage esports. So it's not just about waiting for the benefits to happen. It's use some strategies to maximize the benefits. And my interviewees did. I interviewed some people from the motor racing organizations and also cycling organizations. So these are two different type of sports. Also in the water world, they also have some difference. So that's the main area I'm focused on.
So I'm curious, what was your what other focus did you have in your undergraduate studies? And do you have a master's degree?
Oh yeah, I actually read honors degree after my undergraduate studies, and at that time, since 2019, from my honors study, I started to learn something about esports. And at that time, my topic is about the motivations change during the process of esports fans from the beginners to the more mature stage. And then I try to focus on the supplier side. Like in my PhD study, I focus on about how sport organizations to leverage esports.
Okay. So when you're researching and interviewing which organizations like in cycling and in cycling have you interviewed?
Yeah, so I interviewed managers from NASCAR, supercars, and also F1 for the motor racing perspective. And for the cyclist perspective, I interviewed some managers from Zwift and these types of platforms, and also have some interviews with people in national and state sport organizations such as All Cycling and also Canada Cycling.
Have you thought to interview anyone from the Tour de France?
Sorry, to France?
Tour de France? Uh-huh.
What do you mean by to France?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's probably the biggest cycling event in the world. They're the most famous, the Tour de France.
Oh, yes. No, I just interviewed more about the organization's perspective. So maybe some of interviewees just talk about their own series, but not quite like the directly the event perspectives.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, because if you were to interview them, it would be more the event rather than the organization, right?
Yeah, like more about the events, but as you know, during the pandemic, or the events are canceled or postponed. So that's why some of organizations started to use esports as a substitute or try to fill the gap during the time. So that's the reason why I focus more about online events.
Okay, so that's actually a really good point because what we saw was a shift from traditional sports to esports and traditional sports kind of being combined.
Mhm.
So let me ask you, how do simulations play a role in esports, particularly in motor racing and cycling?
Yeah, so it's very different types of esports actually. So for maybe based our understanding, the traditional esports like Dota 2 and League of Legends, we need to use a computer or laptop, and you just need a mouse. So for the motor racing and cycling esports, it need different types of equipments, and it's all based on the participants' equipment. For example, the motor racing esports, they can use a wheel and also controllers, so you can have a very immersive experience, and the skills actually can directly transferable between the real world and the virtual world because all the things are the same. For the cycling, it's actually different because they are just using an e-trainer, and you can put your bicycle at home and connect with the e-trainers to link to the virtual world. That's the role played by simulation. But for other types of sports, such as football and basketball, they actually have very different experience because they can directly use, for example, PS5 and also Switch. It's just a handle, but it's not really like the skills cannot directly transferable because you still need some body competition with others in the traditional sport. But in motor racing, the skills are the same. And there's even some drivers actually use esports to in their training because it's quite expensive and costs a lot of money to travel to another place and try to and there are a lot of rules for them to use the racetrack and try to remember the racetrack. But in the virtual world, actually you can directly use esports and remember the racetrack, so it's actually beneficial for their training.
So when you talk about cycling and the equipment that they need for simulations, are you talking about something like a Peloton?
Yeah, it's just like e-trainers. So they actually just based on the power of weight, you can just enter your weight sometimes to directly participate in the cycling esports in the virtual world. And actually, most people try to use that for keep fit, for keep healthy. So it's like less competitive. It's more about keep health.
So if you're like a cyclist, can you just put your own bike on a stationary trainer and then connect it to a computer in order to participate?
Yes, there are some e-trainers you can directly connect to your bicycle, like put your bicycle there and link to the e-trainers. It's just like to link the small screen about the e-trainer.
So in simulations, in addition to having the fun of racing in simulations for esports, is it also used to increase skill and training? Like for example, if you're in motorcycling, if you spend time on the simulator, will that translate to skill on the track?
Yes, the skills can be transferable. It's a quite important findings from my research actually. So because you also use the wheels and controllers and the wrist tracks, and you can have a like first person perspective. So it's actually a very immersive and authentic experience for the drivers to try esports, and actually it's create a pathway for esports fans to become real world, like using the motor racing. So it's like esports become a pathway for sport organizations to attract more fans and to engage them, and hopefully can transfer them to their main products in the real world. So because of the skill transferability.
I would think that there are people who really would they have kind of a dream of being a motorcycle racer. And so they get to this opportunity to do so without actually risking their lives. Is that an advantage to this?
Yes, definitely. So this is one of the advantage because as we know, motor racing is quite expensive. It's not all the people have the cars in their backyard, right? And it's also quite inherently risky sport. But in esports, you don't need to worry about the accident, a car crash or something like that. So you can directly clicked restart and everything's all right. You don't need to even repair your cars and which spend a lot of money and you need a team to do that. But in esports, you can directly start again and it's not hurt your body or not ruin your health or something like that. So it's definitely a benefits for people to start trying this type of sport, but in a virtual world, and they don't need to have the risks.
Yeah. Are there any other advantages to using simulations or benefits to using simulations other than what you've mentioned?
Yes. But from the sport organization perspective, it's more like they can attract both new and existing fans. So it's not like other types of esports such as FIFA. So in FIFA, their fans group are actually separated because they have different interests in the real world skills and esports skills. In esports, they can only have some tactics the similar, but not the physical skills. But in motor racing, because all the things are similar, so they can actually have the real world drivers directly go to the virtual world and compete with each other. Mm-hmm. So it's actually attract a lot of fans based on that. And there's also benefits to the sponsors actually, because the sponsors don't need to invest too many money to have the sponsorship. They can try to sponsor the esports in the virtual world and try if their investment is good or not. So it's also a way to attract both new and existing sponsors actually. There's also some benefits like they can like I mentioned before in training and also try to give them a pathway from esports to real world or the real world to esports, and it's actually fill the content gap for fans because in esports you don't need to worry about whether if it's weekend and the drivers can actually jump onto Zoom or other types of app to have the live streaming, and they can have more communication with their fans. So the fans can feel them, they can be more linked with the drivers. And during the esports experiences, actually, they don't need to wear the helmet and the safety gear because it's quite safe in esports. So their fans can actually see their reactions in their face. So they can feel more related with these types of they can feel more related with the drivers. So this is also can enhance and engage them to participate the experiences.
That's actually a really good point, because being able to see someone's face and really know what they look like as opposed to just seeing the color of their helmet. I mean, that doesn't really do much to provide more fan engagement. So I see that as a benefit. And so would you think that you mentioned sponsors, and so when we see esports more in the metaverse, do you think that motor racing and cycling simulations will become even bigger?
Yeah, I think so, because Do you know the movie called Ready Player One? I think that is a movie talk about the metaverse, right? And there's also actually some elements about the motor racing stuff. And it's also like using simulations to link to the virtual world, and everything happens in the virtual world. So I can like definitely say there's a trend like the simulation types of esports can also be like a mediator to go to the metaverse world.
Right. So, what do you think the biggest benefits and limitations of using simulations in esports are?
Mm. Yeah, so one limitation is about whether it can directly help the environment in the virtual world. For motor racing, it's all right. It's a first person perspective and they can directly compete with that and even try some different types of racetracks they can never achieve in the real world. But actually, for cyclists, their feelings are different because they need to feel the wind and they want to see the environment when they are doing cycling or biking. So it's actually quite different experience for them to just ride at home. And also, people it's hard to control their equipment. For example, some participants may try to buy this brand A's e-trainers, but someone purchased the B, and it's hard for them to compete with each other and put them together. But it's the things that can't controlled by the organizations, but controlled by participants. Also about the internet connection. Sometimes it's hard to control things for the like event organizers. Yeah,
Sure.
and also there could be some limitations about how to control their cheating because there's some technical doping in the area actually. So they only use power of weight to try to like keep them fair, but actually they can directly enter their weight to the system. And there's also about the rights of different sport organizations. Like there are some platforms about the e-trainers. They actually have exclusive right to the sport organizations. So at this point, they can't like have directly link with their own sponsors. They need to use the sponsors of the platforms, but they have to collaborate with the like the platforms. Otherwise, they can't have the esport products. So it's also some limitations about the sport organization's capacity and resources. During the pandemic, it's actually everything is all right because all the resources can be used and focused on esports. It's not need to use the resources for the real world sport because all the events are postponed or canceled. But after the pandemic, they still need to have something, and their main focus is actually about their real world products. For motor racing, it's all right because it's commercial sport organizations, and actually it started before the pandemic. So it's esports is one of their strategies actually. But for the cycling organizations, sometimes they are not the same because they directly started during the pandemic and only need like the esport to fill the gap. So their main focus and also the riders sometimes only want to participate more in the virtual, like in the real world. So their preference is still the real world experience, not the virtual world experience. So there are some limitations.
So, why do you think esports has become a popular topic for graduate level research?
Yeah, at the beginning, as mentioned, because I started out 2019, so at that time, it's not a lot of research about esports. At that point, it's just about a lot of discussion and debate about whether esports is a sport or not, something like that. And even now, when we went to the like the conference, there are a lot of people still asking you the similar question, like whether esports is sport or not. But it's not the most important point. The most thing is how to manage it and how to use that. So that's one of the reasons why I try to enter the area. And also another thing is just like my friends around me really love to play esports. And sometimes they travel and try to see the esports events. And I don't really understand why you watch like esports events. It's in the virtual world. Even you go to the venue, it's still in the virtual world. And that's why I try to understand their like experience and what motivated them to travel and linked with the travel experience. So that's why I started. And right now it's actually more researcher actually focus on how to manage these types of industry. And it's quite fast growing and it's very beneficial industry. It can earn a lot of money. So and there's also many researchers focus on like how to maximize benefits and consider about the commercial behaviors. So these are more important thing for me to just consider the difference between esport and sport. And there's like it's tricky about to directly about consider the definition things. Yeah. So yeah, I think more important thing is how to manage it and like maximize benefits from that.
Yeah, you were referring to our experience at the University of Qatar. We both spoke at the World Association of Sport Management conference in Doha. And we both kind of felt that these questions about whether esports is a sport or esports participants are athletes, that's kind of old news. And the newer, more interesting research questions like you're examining are much more relevant to the future, and that these old topics are just, they're done. We're done with them, right?
Yes. And for me, it's not very make sense to directly ask because there's one debate about the point about the physical skills of esports. But there are, like, for example, some research talk about the heart rate of players is actually the similar with traditional sport. And as my research talks about, actually the skills can be transferable for motor racing in particular, but it can help you to like develop your skills and sometimes the physical skills. So it's hard to just talk about the definition. It's more about the management. So that's why I come to the point.
Sure. And so what are some of the other key questions that researchers in this field are currently exploring?
Yeah. Right now, they are more wider, like I mentioned. So they focus on, for example, sponsors and for my areas about how sport organizations start use esports and like their brand to try to extend their brand image, something like that. And also the live streaming perspective. Like there are a lot of people like not the drivers, the popular people try to use the live streaming and attract fans and benefits from that. There are very like interesting topics in this area and about this industry.
Sure. And so how do you think that the intersection of esports and motor racing and cycling is likely to evolve in the future?
Yeah, so for me, it's like the motor racing one developed like more like better than in cycling area, because as I mentioned, the motor racing organizations try to use esports as one of their key things. So they started to use esports before the pandemic, and actually during the pandemic, it facilitated the esports using. And in the future, they consider to collaborate even with some popular popular traditional esport to have their elements in these types of esports, not just about the simulation types of esports. So it's quite interesting in the future. For the cycling organizations, they still consider about the financial problems because their resources are still just from the maybe from the government somehow, and also they are not-for-profit organizations. So their key resources are still need to focus on the real cycling rather than just focused on esports. So they need to consider about this issue, and there are also some sport organizations stopped using esports after the pandemic. So that could be a loss for them, but they need to consider how to deal with the issues and continue in the future.
Terrific. Okay, so can you recommend any resources for viewers who might be interested in delving more deeply into this topic?
Yeah, so about esports in general, about like esports, there is a literature review from Fidell, ThinkTech Hawaii 2022. So that article is quite about the academic areas about what talks about esports. And there's also some other articles about directly about how the sport organizations use the cycling platforms Zwift and like technical doping, something like that. And also there are some articles about for example, Laptar's Etekeo, and some other authors also talk about these areas of things, but more about like sport organizations use esports at this point. Like for me, I'm trying to publish my articles about how to maximize benefits. I'll let you know when I get it published.
Absolutely. So last question. What led you to be interested in cycling and motorcycling in relation to esports? Like what about your background and what you were doing made you pick this as a field of your PhD study?
Well, first of all, I think I must have some interesting things to do my PhD study. So it's a long journey. So I need to find there something I'm interested in. And it's just like I write some news. And at the first time, I focused on about the tourism perspective. But because of the pandemic, it's hard to collect data about because all the events are canceled or postponed. So I have to focus on the online events. But there are some interesting links between the traditional sport and esports, and like motor racing and cycling try to build the gap during the pandemic. That's why I'm interested in this area and try to finish my long journey based on that.
Sure. And are you a gamer?
Oh yeah, actually I just play randomly some of the video games, but my skills not that high level. So I won't say I'm a gamer, but I'm interested in playing this type of things for like entertainment.
Sure. All right. Well, Dongqi, it was fantastic having you on, and it was exciting to hear what you're doing at University of Queensland.
Thank you so much.
All right. And so to our viewers, thank you for joining us today. We have an exciting show for you in 2 weeks. See you then.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.